Well, hey, welcome to DECENTRAFIVE. My name is Jason Dukes, and this is the show where we try to take 5-ish minutes, squeeze in 10 questions, and then we do zero edits. And our special guest today is Natalie Brunell. Natalie, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Let's jump right in. All right. Number one, it is clear how smart you are. Concisely explain why own Bitcoin.
So I believe that Bitcoin is the way that you can plan for your future. It is the only form of money that exists today that cannot be manipulated, debased, or printed by any central authority. Right now, in our country, especially, we are moving more and more in the direction of authoritarianism and complete government control, especially when we one day have a central bank digital currency. And I truly believe in freedom. I believe in self-determination, and I believe in the values that our country was built upon. And I think that when you have an abundance of money, you have scarcity in the economy and in society, as Jeff Booth writes. But when you have scarcity in money, you can have abundance in society because your money can go up in value. And that's what Bitcoin offers through its scarcity and its decentralization. And I think it's the most powerful asset and savings technology that was ever created.
I love it. I love it. Who or what captured your attention with Bitcoin?
I think all the thought leaders captured my attention, which is why I started my podcast, Coin Stories. I was just so amazed by the amount of brain power and intelligence in this space, especially when it came to matters of money and economics. So that's why I wanted to speak with them, to understand their backstories, their origin stories, their career paths, and why they eventually found Bitcoin and developed conviction in the technology. So I think all the thought leaders are really inspiring to me.
Very cool. So what does being a first-gen American mean to you?
I'm really grateful that it taught me the values of hard work and education. My parents came here for the American dream. They fled Eastern Europe because they grew up in communism and heard stories about their parents, my grandparents' experience with communism, and they wanted a place with social mobility, economic opportunity, and freedom. And so when they came here, they really instilled in me a drive to make something of myself and to pursue whatever I want to achieve by working hard, getting a good education, and, being that person that really cares and puts the extra effort in. I think so many people today, especially younger generations, they feel like things are just going to be handed to them. And that's not the way the world works. It's not fair, right? You have to be the person that really wants it, that works for it, that takes the extra hours to study something, to build the skills, to come in early, to leave late, and to make the relationships that ultimately help as well. Because so much of life is about the relationships you build with people that you can learn from and grow with. So I'm just really grateful for that immigrant grit that my family gave me.
I love it. I love it. What do you love about being an adjunct professor in advanced communication and visual storytelling at USC?
It's just been such an honor to work with the students because this industry, communication and storytelling, it evolves so quickly because of technology. And it's been wonderful to see sort of the world through their eyes. And it's inspiring to be able to make an impact on them and help them to really believe in themselves. I had a lot of professors in college that it felt like they were, teaching me things that were in textbooks, but nothing really based on real world experience. Maybe they hadn't worked in the industry for a long time, or they were always professors or teachers. Whereas I really had that 1 foot in, 1 foot out kind of tactic where I was still working in the industry while also teaching. And I could tell them what it was really like and tell them the challenges and also the triumphs that I had and the great things about the industry and where it was going. So it was just amazing to work with the students. And I've had so many that have gone on to do great things, and they keep in touch with me. And it's such a fulfilling relationship.
So briefly talk about two experiences on your renowned podcast, Coin Stories, that you already mentioned. Two experiences that were really formative for you.
Well, I think one of them is just in general, just starting the podcast, because I had another podcast prior to this, just as a hobby. It was called Career Stories, where I've always been inspired by origin stories, especially ones in which someone kind of came from nothing and it overcame obstacles to achieve success. I love rags to riches stories, probably because my backstory kind of is the rags version. So I had this podcast because I love interviewing people and learning their stories. And once I discovered Bitcoin, I had a mentor who said, why aren't you interviewing the people within the space that you are reading their books and watching their YouTube interviews and listening to their podcasts? And so it was a very pivotal moment for me because it ultimately ended up changing my career. So just taking that step, doing it on my own was very pivotal for me. So for anyone out there that has an idea, like go after it. Don't just think about it, go do it, because it might turn into something bigger than you even expected. And then second, it would just be, I think my Michael Saylor interview was really amazing. It definitely was a point where people started to take my podcast more seriously. It was the most downloaded episode. A lot of eyeballs came to me saying like, who's this girl? And I was just so grateful that he shared his time and got so personal about his backstory, his family, and his journey to finding Bitcoin. So I'd say those are the two biggest experiences.
Very cool. And thank you for doing the same with me. I appreciate it. So you may change the name of your podcast though, right? I mean, I saw you tweet about that the other day. What are you considering?
Yeah. So two things on that. Number one, the reason I called it Coin Stories is I thought it was going to be like a one season, just a couple episodes. And it was kind of a play on my old podcast name. My old podcast was Career Stories. So I changed it to Coin Stories. But really, now that I've interviewed so many people and I've gotten their backstories, I want to bring them back on. And I also want to branch out and talk to other people that may not be in Bitcoin, but maybe the topics are sort of on the fringe of Bitcoin. And so I just want to be able to expand it more. And I sometimes think people think it's like a token podcast, like all coins or something. So I've been thinking about it. I've had suggestions to change it. So stay tuned. It might change.
Very cool. Very cool. So 2 people that you would really like to interview in the next 3 months.
I don't know if it'll happen in the next 3 months. A girl can dream, but I would love to have Cathie Wood on the podcast. I heard her panel at the Bitcoin conference, and she's always really, really amazing. And I'm always inspired to get, powerful, strong women in the industry on the show. And, another dream guest would actually be Joe Rogan. And I know that he's talked about Bitcoin on his show. I really admire him as a personality and as a thinker and as a podcast host. And I would just love to sit down and talk to him about his whole journey, his backstory, but also about Bitcoin.
That's very cool. I love it. True or false, in your opinion, obviously, fiat is dead?
I think fiat is in the midst of dying. Yes, it's dying a slow, painful death. It's making its death actually painful for everybody. No, I think that fiat still obviously serves a purpose, and we can't fool ourselves. We're a little tiny asset class right now, but we're growing, and we're showing people that, the fiat system that we live in has caused a lot of disadvantages and wealth concentration and things that put a downward pressure on society that make it challenging for people to achieve the American dream. And so I think fiat could be fixed by Bitcoin.
Very cool. The Lightning Network will likely make Bitcoin more usable in the everyday, right? I know that's part of the goal of it, but tell that story that I saw recently on social media of how you've seen that even work firsthand.
Sure. So that is what's making Bitcoin scalable, and it's making it into a payment rail and a medium of exchange in real time. I think the Lightning Network is really useful in developing countries like El Salvador, where I visited, because it allows people to exchange value at the speed of light, with no fees, no remittances, and none of the things that really impact people when they're trying to send money somewhere. So I think that as it grows, it's going to help Bitcoin adoption, and it's going to be that payment layer that we're going to need and we're going to use in order to scale Bitcoin.
I love it. I love it. And did you send money to someone in the Ukraine and they got it in seconds, or did you retweet somebody that did that?
I retweeted that. Yeah. There's a lot of people that are sending money to refugees. They get it pretty much instantly, and they can transfer it to cash or to fiat pretty quickly. And it's really inspiring.
It's cool. Yeah. The Bitcoin ATM, and that was cool. So would you be willing to share about how your faith has defined your identity and purpose?
Sure. So I come from a family of faith. I grew up Catholic, and I'm someone who definitely believes in strong morality and ethics. And one thing that I was taught by my parents and through my church is that you have to be a good person. And if you're a good person, it pays in dividends, and we're all connected. We are all at the same at our core in terms of what our needs are and our need to connect. And so we want to be good to one another, and good things come to you when you are good to others. So I really love that Bitcoin has a community of givers. It's about giving as opposed to taking, which I find really inspiring, regardless of whether the Bitcoiner is Christian or not, has faith or doesn't. And I truly feel like we're at this point in history where things have gotten so volatile, so polarized, so divided, so hopeless. And I feel that there's some divinity in Bitcoin and in the invention of Bitcoin at a time when we kind of need it the most, because our system is going toward further and further debt and debasement and I think division. And I think this is the one thing that can bridge that and bring us together and unify us. And I think ultimately my faith, I feel like there's something divine in that.
Yeah, that's powerful. Last question. Who else should we interview on Decentrify?
Have you spoken to Preston Pysh or Jeff Booth yet?
Haven't yet. No, that would be awesome.
Those are two of my favorites in the space. So I would say them.
Very cool. Well, I'll try my best to reach out to them. Natalie, thank you so much for the time today and just your generosity of time, giving me the chance as we launch in the early stages of this podcast, and grateful for you coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me.